Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mesothelioma UK interviews. We've been continuing with a series of interviews, and we hope you found them helpful. Today, I'm going to talk to Julie Roberts. I met Julie a few years ago now, and I'm really glad that I think I can call her a friend. And I think that's what mesothelioma does. It brings the community together, hopefully. And so I'm just going to have a chat with Julie this afternoon. So Julie, it's great to see you, even though it's just on screen. And I wonder if you could just tell us about your involvement, your story with mesothelioma.
Yeah, of course. So I live in Edinburgh, in Scotland, and I lost my dad to mesothelioma. Gosh, it'd be 5 years. It's hard to believe, but it was 5 years ago, and it just seems to have gone like that. And just after Dad was diagnosed, we were super unfortunate, and that my uncle was diagnosed as well with the same thing, with mesothelioma. So Dad was a joiner, Uncle Jim was a plumber, and the two of them, we had them for 8 months before they both passed away, and then they unfortunately passed away within 8 weeks of one another. So we had this horrific situation whereby both of them were kind of, you know, they were sort of mirroring one another, and it was really intense and quite upsetting to see. And then, as I say, they passed away. uh, Uncle Jim was first, and then my dad on Easter Sunday, would you believe, about 5 years ago now. So it just absolutely devastated us as a family. It's all the girls that are left now. There's like no men, and we had never heard of mesothelioma in our lives. Like when Dad was diagnosed, we just were like, "Meso what?" like, and it's a strange thing because everyone will say the same thing. I don't know what that is. I've never heard of that. And I guess back when I was in that same boat, I was like, yeah, it must be really rare. And then when I looked into it, I was like, oh my God, like it's not rare at all. Like we've got the highest rate of it in the world, in the UK. And the most concentrated rates, to my knowledge, are in Scotland, in the west of Scotland.
That's correct.
So it just became, I was shell shocked. I just couldn't believe that was, and here nobody had heard of it. So about a year after Dad had passed away, the Scottish government had released their new cancer strategy. So I think their cancer strategy works on a 3-year cycle, and they just come to the end of the 3-year cycle and they'd re-updated it or revised it or whatever it is they do. And I was like, oh great, there'll be something in this on mesothelioma. Let's see what the Scottish government are doing, because they had said that they were so proud of their new strategy because it tackled all 200 known cancers in Scotland. So I was like, great, it's going to be at the top. It's going to be the top 10. Come on. So got the cancer strategy, and it's a fairly hefty document, and I read it and I couldn't see any mention of the word mesothelioma. So I was like, I must have missed it. So I read it again. Nah, still nothing. And there wasn't even a reference to asbestosis, nothing. And I was like, well, that's wrong. Like that, there's been an error. And it was only at that point I had started to ask around a few other people and just realised that how dire the situation Scotland was for mesothelioma. I mean, I still believe it's excluded because the government know that it is a major problem, a major health issue, even now for a lot of people. I think that the government are afraid to let people know just how bad it potentially could be, because as we know, it is in every home public building built before the 90s. So I mean, when you think about that, it's very scary. And then there's obviously schools and hospitals. But
This was all the information that you've
I could not believe.
absorbed very soon when
Yeah,
your dad was diagnosed and your uncle, and just soaking this up, aren't you? And the injustice of it, really.
it was just unbelievable. And for the year or 8 months that Dad was ill, like we just focused on Dad and being with each other and spending the time that we had. And I was adamant when I started to look into it and uncover it, because the other challenge we had was, well, nobody knew where to send us. Like Dad was diagnosed and it was like, that's it. But we were like, but what do we not get stuff? Like, is there no information? Like, how do we deal with this? And there was no plan. There was no like pathway for a doctor or for anyone to be able to even signpost us, it was all like, well, I think so-and-so's doing some work on that, and well, you might want to Google this, or we think this is the charity that looks after patients with mesothelioma. And that was just on the sort of the care side, the clinical side. Outside of that, there's the financial side as well. And it was just, and we had to piece everything together, and it took up so much time. It was so stressful, and it took time away. We always say it was like time spent that we could have, because of course the whole time the clock is ticking, and we knew that. We had to get things sorted and organized. So when Dad passed away, I was just like, there was just something in me that just nothing that had happened had sat well with me. And I just knew I had to do something, but if I'm being honest, I didn't actually know what it was. And then, like I say, about a year after, when I'd gathered all this information, Hibernian FC, who are our local football team, now the football was Dad and I's thing. We went, like, that was, like, I was a real dad's girl, and every Saturday we went at 3 o'clock to watch Hibs at Easter Road. And they launched this video called Life with Hibs. Now, it was a video to market their season ticket. And it was a brilliant video. It was all about what would your life be like without the football? And it was really emotional. When I watched it, I was like, what would my life be like if now that Dad's died, I've got all these amazing memories of going to watch Hibs with Dad, like cup finals, semi-finals, quarterfinals, and everything else, the highs and the lows. Thank God. And I'd never thought of a football team like that before. You just take it for granted. You just go to the football. You don't think anything of it. Anyway, at the same time, Hibernian FC have got a really good community wing of the club, shall we say. And they'd also done some great work and launched a program called Game Changer, which still is a public social partnership with NHS Lothian. And it was to look to promote the health and well-being of supporters and people in the community where the club sits. So we live in Leith. And the two things landed at the same time. And I was like, it was like the light bulb moment. I was like, that's it. I'm going to write to Hibs and tell them what my story is of life with Hibs with my dad. And at the same time, I'm going to say what's happened. And is there any chance through this Game Changer partnership, they could help me just raise the profile of what mesothelioma is? That's all I wanted to do.
I have to tell you, every time I hear of Hibs, I think of you, and I think of your dad, and I think of how football, is very important in lots of people's lives and other sports,
And incredible people.
Yeah, and also the link, the light bulb moment as well for me is the link between health and football, and how, I mean, we're seeing how sport changes, hopefully in respect and all those sorts of things. But that link 5 years ago with health, I was blown away by it when you started to tell us about it.
Yeah, it was just game changing. Well, literally game changing. And again, I had never considered it either. But they've got a captive audience. I mean, it's so emotional, football. And if a club puts something out, you pay attention and you listen in a way that you wouldn't to a doctor. I don't think it's just got that emotion. So I wrote to the chief executive and a lady called Leanne Dempster. And I didn't think anything of it, Lorraine. I just was like, they'll probably get this letter and go, I'll get a note back from her PA. Thanks very much. That was a nice story. Yeah. Well, the next thing she's
a bereavement card.
A bereavement card, exactly.
For our season ticket holders.
Exactly. There'll be no perks, the football, they're all the way up there. Yeah. But the next thing she phoned and she's like, is this Julie? I've got your letter in my hand. I've read it at our board meeting. Everyone in the board meeting has been in tears. We want to see you. I was just like, okay, great. All right, okay. So when do you want to see me? So she's like, can you come and see us it was Friday. So I went down to the club and I met with her and the head of marketing, and they were like, we got this letter, and we were like, when we launched the Life with Hibs thing, we were like, this is a great campaign, but we don't really know what to do with it now. And then 3 days later, we got your letter, and we were just like, oh my God, this is it. This is what we need. So they asked if they could turn the letter into a little film. It was just me talking to camera about, basically it was me reading my letter, the story of going to the football with my dad and how precious it was. And I wouldn't have had the memories that I, have now if it hadn't been for our wee trips. And so they made this film. It's like a few minutes long, and they put it out through all their social media channels and everything. And I just was like thinking, oh, nobody will watch that. My God, like it went bananas. Like was like, I think I was up till 2 a.m. Everybody was like tweeting and Facebooking, and it just the story just connected with so many people. And then I got stories about dad, and so many people came forward that said, my dad, my uncle, my mum has got mesothelioma, but we'd never heard of it. We're in the same boat. And I was like, boom, this is it. There's something else coming. And after that video went out, Kezia Dugdale got in touch with the club. Now, she was the leader of the Scottish Labour Party at the time, and she said she would like to meet me at Holyrood, which is our Scottish Parliament. Could I go and meet with her? And it just went like that from there. And I've never been a confident person, but I was just went in and told my story and said, there is something morally wrong about what's happening here, and something needs to be done, and I'm here to do it, basically.
Brilliant.
And she said, I want to have a big discussion about this. I need to host a round table. Could you find me people, experts in the field, that can come to this round table so we can have a chat about just how bad it is and what we can do to address the issue? So I was like, yeah, sure. Knew nobody in the field, and I just literally made a list of a few places to start. The hospice where dad was. I knew about Meso UK because you were a massive part of my investigation when I was trying to work out, piece the picture together. And then from there, it was literally people recommending, it's not me you need to speak to, you need to speak to so-and-so. And I think within 5-6 days, I had a table of about 20 odd people that were able to come and attend this round table. It was the 4th of November. I think it was 2015 or 16, yeah.
16,
And it was incredible. There was like Kevin Blythe was there. It was the first time I met Kevin Blythe, who's the respiratory consultant that leads the Meso network in Scotland now. There was the doctor that looked after dad from the hospice. Trade unions were there, Macmillan were there, Meso were there. I mean, you guys have been incredible. I think every time I've had something, you've sent somebody to come and represent you, which is, again, just speaks volumes for the work that you do and the support that you give to people. And it just adds that credibility to the message that you're trying to put across. Who else was there? The lawyers were all there. So Digby Brown, Thompson's, and then local sort of charities that are quite big on the scene, shall we say, for lobbying the government. Clydeside Action on Asbestos, it's not called that now, I think it's something else, forgive me Phyllis, she'll kill me for saying the wrong name. And a couple of others that were there. Scottish Hazards, a big charity that lobby the government on safety at work, were there. So it was a big, and then obviously there was representatives from some of the politicians, and I've always tried to say, but this is across, although Kezia in the Labour Party really took the lead with it, I've always tried to hold the argument that it's a cross-party issue. So at the end of that debate, and it was brilliant, it was like a 2-hour roundtable discussion. Kezia Dugdale put a motion before the Scottish Parliament. It was called Tackling Mesothelioma in Scotland, and she asked for members of Parliament to back the motion, and within 3 days it got cross-party support from everyone, which meant it had to go to a debate, and the Cabinet Secretary had to respond on behalf of the government as part of that process. So that debate was on the 22nd of December, 5 years ago, and it was just incredible. Again, I think you guys were there. Kevin,
I met you. First day I met you then.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe we were sitting in this Parliament building. Well, we were in the main office, like the equivalent of what you would see in Westminster, everybody kind of shouting at each other. And they debated it out. There was representatives from all 5 of the Scottish political parties in Scotland just argued it out, and the Cabinet Secretary for Health had to respond on behalf of the government, and she still, had her party line around why it wasn't being tackled, but she promised to look into it, and it maybe didn't get the response that we wanted, but I'm like a dog with a bit between the teeth. I just kept going. I was like, that's fine, and I kind of expected that. I'm not going to get the win first time around, but after that I just kept going to all the cross-party groups, and every time there was a Q&A I'd put my question in and I would stand up and I would ask them questions. So I think at one point they were just like, oh God, it's her again. Like, what? She's still beating this drum. I managed to. So if you've ever lobbied the government as well, it's old-fashioned. Everything is in writing. So I spent hours writing to like politicians and going to see them in their clinics, and I asked for a meeting with the chief medical officer of the Scottish government at the time. It was David Dunlop, not Jason Leach that it is now, and he'd come from the Beatson, so it was quite good. And I managed to get this one. He's like, I think I'd asked to meet the cabinet secretary on her own, and she'd said no, but I'll let you meet the chief medical officer. And I was like, great, that'll do. And Kevin Blythe came with me to that because I was like, I've got this like one-to-one. Could you come with me? So you can talk the clinical talk and I'll just tell my story. And again, I've always just been quite upfront and honest, and you get I just tell my story, Lorraine, and it's a story about, I'll always say this, it's a story about family, and anybody that's diagnosed with cancer, that's all it ever is a story about family. And I think fundamentally the fact that there was nothing in Scotland, like at the time, there were no specialist nurses. There was one, Julie Devlin in Glasgow, and she was funded by two cancer charities. There was no funding at all, which Kevin Blythe had explained to me. That means there's no appetite to improve outcomes for patients. So it's just forgotten about, and it's excluded from cancer waiting times because of that, because there's no, it's the knock-on effect of, well, if it doesn't really count, if it's not audited, then it doesn't really count. So it's excluded from cancer waiting times because it doesn't have to be part of that metric system. And I was just like, but how is that, like, how? And I told the story at one of the network presentations around, and it was, I always say, this is not me speaking badly of anybody, but when my dad was diagnosed, I had a friend whose mum was diagnosed with breast cancer, and there was such a difference. And then after diagnosis, what happened? And we battled for every piece of information, and there was a clear pathway for her, and which was brilliant. And it was clinical trials, and it was treatment, and it was, your lifespan is this. Dad, it was like, go home, die. And it was, I mean, that's not like, maybe not so brutally as that, but I was sitting in the room and I was like, so what you're saying is my dad's going to die and there's nothing you can do about it. And yes, there was an option for chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and the doctor said, there isn't anything else we can do other than that. And Dad in the end chose not to have it. Uncle Jim took it, Dad didn't. And it upset me that somebody somewhere had decided that this lady was allowed a chance to live, and my dad wasn't. And in the harshest of ways, mesothelioma is caused by, it's a work-related illness, which really upset me because I was like, well, my dad just got that by going to work. He was just doing, the honest thing, getting his clothes on and going to keep the roof over the head when we were wee and the food on the table. And at the end of the day, the government have turned around and said, thanks for all your help. See you later, bye. So that's always not been right with me at all. And
I think what you're pointing out about the importance of your dad's story and your uncle's story, and the importance of family being alongside him to take this forward for him, bless him, when he was no longer with you, and how traumatic that was.
It's so traumatic.
And still traumatic. I can feel it. Yeah.
Even now, my mum, like, the impact on my mum, I think at one point my sister and I were more worried, and my dad were more worried about my mum because she's watching her brother and dad at the same time. And we unfortunately do have another member of our family that was my grandma's brother. About 4 years ago, before Dad died, was taken by mesothelioma as well. But again, we never heard of it at all.
So it's a condition, it's an illness with a complete injustice, as you pointed out. From you being involved now, and that springboard, which you really, alongside Kevin Blythe, helping you, and as you say, Kevin were able to take this forward, and Hibbs were the catalyst.
Forever grateful. I will be forever grateful to them. Yeah,
that should be a new chant, but there we go. So, but we've moved forward, haven't we, thankfully, because of your story, because of family story, so that now there is the Scottish Mesothelioma Network. We do have a hub and spoke set up of clinicians, of doctors, of specialists in the field, looking at radiology and pathology and better diagnosis. We've got the Scottish Mesothelioma Specialist MDT meeting, which is an all Scotland meeting, which means that there is a voice and a discussion about treatment. and about the way we should go forward with clinical trials and support and everything. And there's a network of Mesothelioma UK nurses, which is good to see. But that must be hard for you to know, and as you've just said about the two stories there, that wasn't there for your dad.
Yeah, and I think when I started it, I was like, I just felt like I didn't want anybody else to feel the way that we had felt. And that's what pushed me, because I just know that feeling of, I've never felt it in my life. It is true hopelessness and despair. Like, how can this be happening? And how can there be nothing for nobody? Like, because there wasn't. I mean, there literally wasn't. That, I'm not even sugarcoating it. Like, there wasn't. And
you tell it as it is, in all its rawness, really, about how difficult it was at that time and how that took you through.
And when I went to see David Dunlop, and I think this is where I can have been a little bit of use, because the politicians and your people in power, you'll ask them a question and you'll get the rhetoric back, right? The answers written from a civil servant somewhere that tell you this is the reason why. And I'd heard that 100 times before. And when I went to see David Dunlop, the same thing. And Kevin Blythe was with me. And at one point I was like, I don't even know, like, I've forgotten what the question was that I've asked him, because he's gone around to houses. And at the end of, when he'd finished speaking, I just said, that's brilliant. Thanks very much for your insight. But yes or no, are you going to give us money to fund this network? That's why we'd been, because we were looking to get the network off the ground. And he just was like, I can't answer that question. I was like, but you can. It is a yes or no question. You either say yes or you say no. And if you say no, then we've got an answer and we'll go somewhere else. But this, like, you know, going around the houses is no use to anyone, you know? So yeah, and of course, he didn't say yes or say no. It was the rhetoric that comes out of these offices. But the network now is, of course, funded by our amazing charities. There's your involvement at Meso, there's Macmillan, and it is just been the most, like, I can't even put into words actually what it's like to see, like, to have been involved. I mean, I only have ever told my story, and this is not me having done this all by myself. I would never want anyone to think that either. Kevin Blythe and his team and many others have been beating the drum on this for a long time before I came along. So I am a tiny part of a bigger,
what you've highlighted, and thank you for doing it so eloquently today, is the importance of the story. Individual stories which make up the collective, and the power of advocacy, because people, although, you know, very, very difficult, people have listened to you, and you continue to be an advocate. You're definitely an advocate for Mesothelioma UK, as we know throughout this year. You've helped us with the Moves the Meso and sessions, which have kept people going. So this is down to you, but I'd like to think that your dad's in there as well, really, because you know he's the driver for this.
100%. I hear him talking to me, and funny, my dad was actually quite, because he was like kind of really working class, and he was always self-employed. He was like, I wouldn't say he was like, he's not trade union-y, but he was like a bit of a, you know, he always had an opinion, like not political, but he always used to say to me, he doesn't vote for anyone, you know, there's nobody going to change his life. I just, you know, look after myself, kind of thing. But I can hear him, like, sometimes I'm typing and I hear my dad talking to me. I'll say, yeah, Dad, right, okay, I'll say that, I'll get that in for you. He would be so proud. I mean, there is no doubt about it. Like, I know he would be, because he was so upset about what had happened, you know, and that's the part of the story that I sometimes find hard to articulate, is how upset he was. He'd just become a granddad. My uncle had just become a granddad, and we feel robbed of the incredible treasure that those little ones are to our family. I mean, God, did they not come along at the right time, because they've been a massive distraction for us.
Well, I remember you saying that at the time, because your sister, the girl, was only
just a little baby. She was 5 when Dad died, and she loved, I mean, Pops, she calls him Pops, and I mean, she's still, I mean, thank God she was 5, because she's got a memory of Dad, and he just adored her. Like, Mum and Dad, they were just like the grandparents of the universe, you know. And we feel sad for her wee loss there, and hard to explain to a child as well, to get her to understand where her uncle's gone and and our granddad. And same with Chloe and Sophia, who are the grandchildren. So Isla's my niece, my dad's granddaughter, and Chloe and Sophia are the grandchildren of my Uncle Jim's.
How's your lovely mum doing? I know how, say about your dad would have been proud of you. I know your mum is really, really proud of you. So.
She is. She's just a wee stalwart. She's at everything, you know, she's like, I'll be there. And she's, I think, come to everything like my wingman, right, always beside me, which is brilliant because I do get nervous. And you know, sometimes the first time, I've never done anything like this before. When I went to the round table, I was dying because, you know, Kezia Dugdale had said to me, is there anything you want to say, Julie? And at that point, I was just like, I can't speak to all these people. What are they going to think about me? So I just spoke.
Yeah,
and I was only able to do that really because my mum was sitting right next to me, and she's been right next to me ever since. Every time we do something, she comes with me. We've been to Dundee to the first Meso network, and I had to present at that, and she's great. Yeah, she's doing brilliant. She's like, you know, it's been a long road for her, and she's, you know, this is a bit of a tricky time of year
yeah,
for us, but she's brilliant. Yeah, she's handled it really well. She misses both of them dearly. I mean, God, yeah.
So, is there anything? What else would you like to see? Is there anything else you'd like to see? What do you thought?
I would like to see the government. I'm not going to let it lie. And so this month is the 5 year since the parliamentary debate. So I'm going to write back to Parliament to say, look, I've not spoken to you in a while, but this is where we're up to now with this network. And I would like to see somebody in the new year to, again, have a conversation about when that funding comes to an end, what options there are for the government to step in and give some sort of funding to help it going. Amazing that we've got the charities to do it, but it shouldn't always fall to charities to plug the gap. So I will keep beating the drum with that. I mean, long term, wouldn't it be amazing to have a cure?
Yeah. Or even for it to be managed like a chronic disease.
Exactly. But, you know, there is no kind of time limit on it, but with medication, trials, whatever, then we can control your pain, but you're going to live, you know, till you die of whatever natural causes, whatever old age, or whatever it is these days.
And we know that Scotland are in those clinical trials. We know that Kevin, you know, is a great driver for research.
An amazing human.
Yeah, and linking in with, you know, the whole of the UK coming together, because again, we're better together.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that's been amazing to see, is the joining up of everything as well. Because before, I know NHS England, NHS Scotland are, you know, we've got devolved power in Scotland for healthcare. But it's been amazing to see the call that we were on just a few weeks ago, like that you were saying that I think they said there was like 100 people had signed up from all over the UK, and the Sheffield University, the research centre that's kind of started there as well. It's just like it will change people's lives, like the joint working. I am always just stand in awe of the people that do the clinical work, like your minds and brains to improve health, and we say the outcomes, but improve the health and well-being of it's just an absolute treasure and a gift. It's such a shame it's taken COVID-19 for the real heroes of our country to come to the fore, because, you know,
I know what you're saying about minds and brains, but behind that, or alongside that, you need the heart, and it's people like you, Julie, who help us with that heart, you know, because these are, you know, not one-off scenarios. You know, the scenarios that you were explaining about your dad should never have been a scenario, but they, you know, there were, and too many of those, obviously. So, you know, we can have all the science in the world, but we need to link up with the experience that people like you and your dad and the family went through then and are still going through now, and the legacy of mesothelioma.
And more is to come. Unfortunately, you know, like we say, it's in all these buildings, hospitals, schools are a massive issue. So I don't know what else I can get myself involved in.
I don't think you're going to be resting on your laurels.
No, No, the main thing is that making sure funding comes from somewhere and that the government are aware of this network, because I'm not entirely sure how aware they are. And it would be brilliant if at some point so in Scotland we have our cross-party group on cancer, and often you'll get guest speakers from healthcare to come and have a wee talk. So I might put a wee suggestion in, because it could be brilliant for Kevin to go along and I'll just nominate Kevin to go along and present the network and make it known, because that's the next thing is it exists. Now we have to let people know that it exists. So I can do that through my networks, which are just kind of online, things like that. But all of Scotland needs to know.
I think the other thing now is that we've got, because of how the network is set up, the Scottish Mesothelioma Network, they can look at their key performance indicators, and they've got you know, the evidence behind now to drive forward for improvements. And they're showing what they're doing, which is tremendous. But like you say, this needs to be sustainable. It needs to go forward. It needs to improve, and we need to work together. So.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the great things about the network, is that it gives these KPIs that is the evidence that you need to then go to the government and say, well, we've set up the network, and this is where we were when we started, and this is the change that it's bringing. And that's your, we would say in the business world, that's your business case for the money, to say, like, you know, we need to keep this work going, because if we don't, well, what's the alternative? Like, if the charities can't afford, it's going to be a tough year for, I mean, everybody's now in this whole new post-pre whatever we're in COVID world, where all of the charities have been hit financially because nobody's been able to do as much fundraising and things like that. So again, there's, at the end of this period of funding for the network, what's going to happen? That, you know, the money has to come from somewhere, and it shouldn't always be charity. So yeah, so again, the KPIs are your evidence to say, well, this is the great work that we've done. Let's, you know, and if you don't, then you've got a great story to go to the press with.
See, there you go again. Oh, it's been great to talk to you this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me, and it's lovely to see you.
Always a pleasure to help.
I'd much rather see you sitting next to you and having a real good chinwag, I must say.
Soon. You'll be getting your own talk show soon, Lorraine.
Oh, I don't know about that.
You are the new Lorraine. Much better one, I would say.
Perhaps best to go for a podcast, hey, then, for that one. Anyway, it's been lovely to see you, and just thank you so much for talking to me today.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to help you guys. Thank you for everything that you do for everyone.
And don't
forget to look after yourselves.
I will. And sharing your story is so amazing and so powerful. And thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye. Take care. Bye. Bye.